You're listening to Materials Business, the podcast where engineering, leadership, and innovation meet diversity and inclusion. Hosted by Monica Hernandez, engineer, entrepreneur, and industry advocate. When we embrace different perspectives, we create stronger industries, smarter solutions, and lasting impact. Now, let's dive in.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on when are you watching us. And thank you for being part of the material business community. Today, I have a really special guest, Dr. V. Thank you for coming into our material business podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, as you guys know, my name is Monica Hernandez. I'm your host. And today we're going to speak about allies and how can you be someone that in these kind of situations that we encounter in the workplace, sometimes we ask ourselves, who is here to help me? But then sometimes you are that person that can help someone else. So what does that even mean? And then how we can make it out together. So yeah, that's why we have a very special person today, completely and super specialized on that, talking to us about allyship. So Victoria or Dr. V, thank you for coming. Thank you for being open to share your story with our audience.
Absolutely. I'm happy to be here.
Do you want to start by introducing yourself?
Sure. So I'm Dr. Victoria Mattingly. People call me Dr. V. I have my PhD in organizational psychology, meaning I was trained in the science of improving the human experience at work. And over the last 9 years, I've specialized in diversity, equity, and inclusion, which has been a very fraught topic over the last 6-9 months here in the US. So I truly believe that where we went wrong with DEI was not including everyone. Certain people saw themselves as not part of DEI, not benefiting from DEI. And I truly believe that the future of DEI is allyship, because that's our way of bringing people into the work, into the solution, so we can solve these problems together rather than solving them alone. And so I call myself a workplace inclusion and allyship expert. My first book was on data-driven diversity, equity, and inclusion. It was called Inclusalytics. So how to help organizations and people doing DEI work take a more data-driven approach to that work. And then my book coming out in September, so it might be out depending on when you listen to this podcast. It's called Act Like an Ally, Work with an Ally. So I'm very excited to get that work out there.
Amazing, amazing. We really do need those kinds of allies. We have spoken about this in this podcast many times, and we have actually, there is like on the top of my head, I can think of really great allies that I have had throughout my career and people that cheer up for me when I'm not in the room. You know, it's like those are the kinds of people that we feel supported by. Why did you start that journey? What is that push you into going this way?
Yeah, so I actually started my PhD work more in the learning and development space, the training space, and I was particularly interested in how can we give employees the tools to deal with the emotional aspect of the job. And I used to be in the service industry and bartending and waitressing, very busy, high volume places, and it is stressful. And no one ever teaches you take a deep breath or don't let one crummy table ruin your night, or like how to have that mindset shift to be able to get through that work. It was only until I was at an internship at Amazon and I noticed the lack of women in that organization, particularly at the top. The only woman on the C-suite at that time was in HR, which is often considered outside of the business, which I hate that delineation. Without people, we don't have a business. So HR should be critical to the business, not outside of the business, but I digress. And so the next internship I had was at a leadership development company. And first off, the CEO there was a woman, which I loved. And secondly, she was working on building out a women in leadership practice. So, programming and assessment and leadership development for women in the workplace. So, after my experience at Amazon, I was like, sign me up. I went right up to her. I was like, because she explained it in the presentation. I went up to her, I introduced myself. I was like, please, I would love to get involved. I'm very interested in this. I have a strong training background. I can contribute that skill set to this work. Long story short, I ended up building a Menace Allies training program for male executives to help them be better allies to women in the workplace. And that's what got me into the allyship space, to the inclusion space, to the DEI space. And, I've still, this whole time, still do a lot of trainings, keynotes, those type of educational experiences. But I've also done measurements. How do we know how inclusive our organization is? I've done a lot of consulting and strategy work. How do we really embed workplace inclusion into organizational processes and how people operate? So yeah, I got into it just by lived experience as a woman in tech. And then also having this amazing opportunity to work with the CEO, a woman CEO at this company, to build out what ended up being my dissertation. So that male executive training program, that was the basis of my dissertation work. And so that's where I really got to dive deep into the allyship literature. And that's why this book coming out is so exciting, because I've been wanting to write this book for years. I started my dissertation work in 2016. That's almost 10 years ago. But my first book, Inclusalytics, that was so important for that moment in time, because it was 2021.
Mm.
DEI was blowing up across all organizations. There's all these new functions and leaders and initiatives. And so I really wanted to apply my training as an organizational psychologist to this DEI field to help them take a better data-driven approach to this work. So that was just so important at the moment. I literally put the allyship book on the shelf, but to come back to it and be releasing it this year is just really, really exciting.
It is really exciting, but congratulations. It is great to build the tools, and it's great to realize that sometimes there are no tools, or the tools are lacking, or the tools are directing people in the wrong direction. So being able to step out of that and create something that will help others is really important. Can you define allyship so people that are
Absolutely.
in this space can really understand what is it?
Yeah, absolutely. So allyship is an ongoing partnership in which an ally and who I call the partner, the recipient of allyship, work together towards some sort of shared goal of inclusion or fairness, right? So I just want to double down on the partnership piece, because a lot of allies get it wrong when they just like come in and want to save the day, right? But they never bother to work with or ask the individual or group they're trying to serve, is what do you need? How can I support you? What challenges are you facing? How can I leverage my power and privilege and status to make your life better? And so that's what allyship is. And then an ally is someone who uses their power, their privilege, their status to support and advocate. And here's the key, to someone who's different than them in some important way, right? So, Monica, I could be your mentor, your sponsor, your cheerleader, your friend, but I can't really be your ally, right? We're both we're both white
Right.
appearing women. I know you're not a white woman, but like if someone just saw us on the street, they'd probably treat us very similarly, right? Because we're
Mhm.
very similar looking. We have a lot of similarities. But we could be allies to, Black individuals in the workplace, people who have different sexual orientations as us, people maybe different religious backgrounds. We have men as allies to women. There's a lot of opportunity where, there's a clear majority group and then there's a clear disadvantaged or vulnerable or underrepresented group, and it's working across that difference where the magic really happens.
Mm-hmm. How is this different from mentorship?
So mentorship is an ally action for sure. Especially, if the partner needs mentorship, right? So the
Mm-hmm.
ally is delivering on what the partner needs, which is mentorship. But that's just one piece, that's just one way of being a good ally, if that's the right way. There's some research that shows that women, especially, are over mentored and under sponsored. So
Huh.
whereas a mentor is someone who just shares and wisdom and information, they're a sounding board, someone to confide in. That person doesn't actively pull you up in the organization the way a sponsor does. A sponsor is someone that says, "Hey, I'm a leader. I have power. I'm high up in this organization. This person is awesome. They're junior, and I'm going to pull them up. I'm going to talk about them when they're not in the room. I'm going to bring them to networking events. I'm going to make sure they're getting high visibility assignments, and I'm going to leverage my status to help this person." That's a sponsor. And what's sad is that, we look at most organizational hierarchies, and the higher you go up, the more men there are, the less women there are.
Mhm.
And men typically sponsor other men. And it's not on purpose. It's not like some sexist, I'm only going to, help other men because I'm a man. It's our just unconscious bias that we see ourselves in others. This person's similar to me. And so you like them more. And it's all subconscious, right? So being a good ally means actively challenging those biases that we have to say, who have I mentored? Who have I sponsored? How different are those people? Are they just like me? How can I go out of my way to make sure the next person I mentor or sponsor is different than me? And a benefit of that is you get to learn a different perspective. You're not in some echo chamber of the same individuals over hearing the same thing over and over again. So there's benefits to allyship for allies as well. But really centering that partner, that recipient of allyship, that's really what matters the most.
So you mentioned there is portions that are like benefits for the ally. Are there benefits from organizations when they implement the correct framework or they support this kind of behavior in their teams?
Absolutely. So allyship is a special type of inclusive behavior. And so to take a step back, inclusion means the behaviors that result in others feeling valued, respected, seen, and heard. When people feel like they belong, that they're valued, respected, seen, and heard, they're more likely to stay at an organization. Turnover is
Oh,
incredibly
yeah.
expensive, especially the higher up positions that you get. So if someone feels like they belong, which is the outcome of inclusive behaviors, they're more likely to stay at the organization. They're more likely to encourage other top talent to join the organization. They're more likely to put more of their heart and soul into the work because they take, a certain like sense of pride. And whenever you feel like you belong somewhere, you want that place to succeed, right? That's just how our brains work. If we're part of something, we want to believe that that thing is successful, and especially if we can contribute to that. And then finally, when it comes to inclusion and allyship, innovation is a huge outcome, getting different voices and perspectives. And so if you're being an ally to people who are different than you, as I mentioned before, you're hearing different perspectives, different viewpoints that could then, inspire different, more innovative work to come out of that. And so inclusion in general is just such a no-brainer for organizations. And what's interesting is, a few years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, all these companies, all these organizations were doing DEI. But those who continue doing it now are getting a competitive advantage because of all those outcomes I just shared, because an inclusive workforce is just a better workforce. And it's the same thing for leadership too. Being a good leader requires you being an inclusive leader. That's what makes leadership good. Like, whenever you understand the individual needs and motivations and, growth goals of your people so you can meet those needs. And that's inclusion in action.
Yeah, like we have seen it in our organization, right? Like in my company, which is an engineering company, I'm sure you know that. Um, there is so much more that we achieve when we sit down at the table and we just pull ideas out of people's heads. It's like, okay, we have this problem. How do we solve it? And then sometimes thinking out of the box for someone that has a different background brings that little brilliant thing that lights the way of how we tackle this problem. So it is
Hmm.
absolutely like we are big um, pushers of listening, and then that empowers people as well. And it goes also with, I don't know if you find it, but it also goes in your families. Like when you, instead of trying to control your kid, you sit it down at the table and you say, okay, how would you do it? All of a sudden, it's not only you trying to figure things out, it is
Yeah.
everyone in a little bit of their effort. And like in my case, it's been really life changing to have
Mm.
that mentality. Why don't you think people do it more then, if it has so many benefits?
So there was actually research that asked that question, and it wasn't because people were sexist or racist. It wasn't because they were against it. It wasn't because they were apathetic, that they didn't care. The primary reason that people don't choose to be allies is because they feel like it's not their place. This is a
Huh.
woman's group. This is a woman's program. Why, as a man, would I get involved in that? There was a organizations. I'm very involved in the IO psychology community. So it's industrial organizational psychology is my full field name, but I've lobbed off the industrial part because it's just too many syllables to share. Uh, but I'm very involved in the IO psychology community, and I found an organization online that was called Blacks in IO, and it centered Black IO psychologists. And initially, I wouldn't have gotten involved, right? Like, because I'm not a Black person. But when I went to their website and I went to their membership page, they had an ally membership. And
Oh,
so I was able to join as an ally member. And that signaled to me, hey, come on in. Come on in,
um,
ally. And so the number one reason in this research why people choose not to be allies is because no one has invited them in.
hmm,
Right. So it can be as easy as, hey, I'm having a really hard time getting my voice heard at these meetings. Can you have my back? Can you echo what I say? Can you help me get some, stage time to be able to present my ideas? Can you be there for me? Can you be my ally? And people are so willing to help, so willing to help. There's way more helpers in this world than there are, bad people. I truly, truly believe that. But the reason people aren't being allies is because no one's asking them to be their ally. And that's where this role of the partner is really important and critical. It's not just being a passive recipient. That's why I didn't use the word recipient in my work.
mhm,
And in research, usually that's the term that's used as the recipient of allyship. But recipient feels so passive, right? I'm just
mhm.
going to get all these things, right? You need to be a partner in allyship. Invite the ally in, help them understand the problems at hand, give them things to do. Like in my book, so I have a little mock up of my book here because it's
Yay!
2 books in one. It's Act Like an Ally for the allies, and then Work with an Ally for the partners of allyship. And I'll say in the partner book, I'll say, hey, I'm telling allies on page A47 that they need to be courageous. So give them something courageous to do, right? Like if I'm telling allies to be courageous, they need your help to figure out what that courageous thing is. So then I want the person reading this side of the book to be like, what is she saying on page A42? And then flip it over and kind of like read both books at the same time, because at the end of the day, we all have an important role to play, whether we're the ally or the partner. And I can't encourage potential partners enough to invite allies into this work with you.
That's very important. And I think this is one of the biggest differences on the work that you're doing is that you're inviting people to collaborate, to work together. But who is the one that wants to be pulled up? That person. So I talk a lot about that when I'm doing, communication sessions, or when I just finished one with the Immigration Society where I help them understand how is this integration to Canadian workplaces for tradespeople, which is very peculiar. And this is one of the things that I always say is you can not only you don't have to complain. Like, it's not your job just to complain. If you want
Yes.
to get something out of it, what is it that you want to get? And then from whom? Like, you need to figure it out. And that's exactly the message that you're conveying here is like, it's also my responsibility. If my goal is to get up high, how to get it done, understanding how to navigate that. This is an incredible tool. And I think for especially women in workplace, we tend to, I don't know if you agree with me, but we tend to think that we are super at everything. We are the super spouse, we are the super mom, we are the super leader, the super friend, the super everything. And then sometimes we tend not to ask for help.
Well, we don't want to appear weak, right? Like we've made it this far. I made it through the program. I made it to the job. I made it to maybe it's first line or second line leadership. And so I can't let anyone know that I have vulnerabilities and that I
Mm.
face challenges, because that's going to come across as weak. And that's why we need more psychologically safe workplaces where people can say, hey, I'm having this issue. Here's some ideas for how we can fix it. Can you help me out? Like making it safe and not worry that I'm going to be judged and that's going to be held against me.
Uh-huh.
And so that's the thing about allyship is not everyone is capable or should be an ally.
Uh-huh.
It's not for everyone. Like I always say with certain workplace inclusion training, diversity training, of course, send everyone to those trainings. But allyship, that needs to be people raising their hand. That needs to be people that really care about things like inclusion and fairness. And so, yeah, we need to make sure that we have the right people as our allies to be able to help us properly solve these problems and to be able to go to them and build that trust and to be vulnerable and not worry about being judged or have that held against you.
That's a really great point. Have you ever felt like that? Have you ever felt judged or that you didn't belong?
So I when I was on the job market, a a mentor of mine told me to not put that open to work banner around my LinkedIn profile
Uh-huh.
and how that came across as desperate and weak. And I didn't necessarily agree with that because I really believe in the power of community and, people wanting to help, people wanting to support. And so by me not singling that, hey, I'm looking for a job, I'm not able to get those potential benefits. Even though he was trying to protect me, right? I don't feel like he judged me in some like negative. I think it came from a place of, concern and goodwill. But I did feel judged for wanting to be more vulnerable by sharing that I was on the job market.
Did you put it, the banner, or not?
I didn't do it. I didn't
No.
do it. Yeah. And maybe
Would
because LinkedIn isn't a psychologically safe space. I don't share
Mm.
all my stuff on LinkedIn.
Uh-huh.
Whereas I would have more in-depth, detailed conversations one-on-one with someone who I trust. And in the book, I have whole chapters on trust and building it and earning it, right? Allies need to earn trust, but
Uh-huh.
also partners need to give grace. If an ally messes up once, you can't just cancel them, right? You need to
Yeah.
give grace. Recognize we're all humans.
Yeah.
What matters isn't not messing up, it's when you mess up, you correct it. You do something about it. You don't repeat it. You don't defend it. You apologize and you change it. And if allies can do that, partners should have the grace to forgive them. And I also say in the book, if an ally messes up over and over and over again, it's time to like cut ties. Like they're not the right
Yeah.
ally for you.
Yeah, maybe there is not that quick. This is really interesting. How can someone there is listeners perhaps that are early career or entering the workforce. How can they find allies? Maybe is that something that is only within the organization? Can it be something that you find outside of the organization that you work for?
I do think there's benefits of having allies that are within the organization that you're trying to overcome barriers and challenges within. So I do think that's important. That being said, I have allies from all walks of my life. Like I'm still very close to my PhD advisor. He's one of my greatest allies. People I haven't talked to in years, I feel like I could reach out to and ask questions and, get their perspective and they would be there for me. So, definitely have allies both within and outside of organizations. And when it comes to finding those allies, I've found that the best allies tend to have three important characteristics. One, they're curious, right? They ask a lot of questions. They want to know about you and about, others and about situations. And, it's not just always pontificating, what they know. They're trying to find out that information. They're curious. Good allies are also humble, right? It's not always about them. They understand the importance of giving others the spotlight, giving others the attention, not knowing all the answers, being okay with that. And
Yeah.
that
Uh,
is demonstrating that psychological safety I was talking about earlier. And then finally, good allies are courageous. Allyship is not easy work. You're going to put your neck out there for someone. You're going to risk, offending someone that because you're calling out, hey, that's a microaggression. Hey, that's a racist thing you just said, you're going to hurt your reputation potentially, by doing that. So like you have to be courageous to put yourself out there and do what you need to do as an ally. So I'd recommend, really thinking about who's in your life that has those characteristics. Think about what marginalized or underrepresented group that you belong to and how an ally could help you in that regard. So for example, I have mental illness. I struggle with mental health issues sometimes. And so I need an ally who doesn't have mental health issues to help me because they have that strength and they have that ability to help me in a way that sometimes I wouldn't be able to help myself, right? Even an ally, a mental health ally that I'm having a rough day. hey, can you cover for me today? And they do. That's being a mental health ally, right? And so really figuring out what area of my life could I use an ally for? How can I find someone who doesn't share that identity that can help me in ways that I couldn't just do by myself?
That's very interesting because when you think about it, totally is like we tend to go to people that look like us. Like if I had a mental day, I need a mental day off. I go to my friend that it's another girl that will understand that I don't know, I'm on my period and I'm having trouble at home and I don't know, I'm stressed about the rent and I just need that a raise of salary so much because I can make it. Like, it's like, and who else will understand you better than someone that looks like you? So it's very interesting and it puts a perspective into who are you even asking for help? Perhaps will they have better tools than someone that is exactly or looks exactly like you?
And I don't want to, minimize affinity. There is something special about having a fellow woman, a fellow, parent, a fellow, if you're LGBTQ, someone in that community as well. Like there's something special and important about having people in your groups around you as well. It's just with allyship, it's just a different, as you said, a different approach, a different way of going about it. But like, we shouldn't be discouraged from hanging out with people who are like us either.
And I get it, but I just said it in the ways that perhaps you're gonna get a perspective that you're not seeing, and that someone that
Exactly.
looks like you will not see.
Exactly.
So
Mhm.
it is not that, like you said before, they're mean to you. It's like actually, it's also like coming out of your victim role and then being participant of how can we all together make it better.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's no victims in allyship. There's no
Yeah.
victims.
This is amazing. It is, it's a lot of information. It's a lot of things that I did know, but a lot of things that actually I think the audience will really benefit from, especially for those people that sometimes they reach out to me and they're like, how can I help someone? Is like, I already am like, I'm very open to, but are you really open? Is so that gives a lot of little mini tools for people to start. And I'm sure in the book there are so many more golden nuggets that you can take on and easy digest. Because that is sometimes what prevents us to take action is that we don't really understand the concept.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah, I really did write the book as, a almost user manual for both how to be an ally and how to be a partner. Once again, it's called Act Like an Ally, Work with an Ally. And you can get it at mattinglysolutions.com/allyship.
We'll
And then
put the
if
link
this
down
is
below so people can
excellent. Yeah, thank
click
you for
on
that.
it.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
just we'll put that in there. So um I'm just having a question about what what to do when someone doesn't is not something like visible. So like an invisible disability, for example, or something that like I suffer migraines like really bad, like chronic migraines for years until my health broke down and then I went down the hill and then I really hit like super bottom. Not little bottom, like a really hard bottom. So
Yeah.
uh and that's something people don't know that you have because it's not like you're black or it's, as soon as like you and I we can look similar, but then if I say yes and then they know that I don't speak English,
Yeah.
is that third language, right? So how can we do when things are not as obvious?
It comes back to the trust piece. It really does. So, who do I trust enough to share this thing about me, right? I
Mm.
remember the first time I had to tell a boss about my depression, and I was terrified. I was so worried. And when you're depressed, the world kind of gets distorted a little bit. So I felt like I was like underperforming and doing a bad job, and I had to tell I needed him to know that this isn't how I typically am, you know. And so I went and I told him, and he was like, first off, I had noticed no difference in your performance. So stop worrying about that. And second off, like, what do you need? Like, how can I help you? You know, and he was so warm and empathetic and receptive and reaffirming, validating. So I think it's finding that person, you know, someone who's empathetic, someone who's compassionate, someone that you can trust and having them be your ally, right? So there's certain things that we don't want to just broadcast. You know, I've only started talking publicly about my mental illness just over the last year or so because I have a platform and I can do good by helping destigmatize mental illness by talking about my journey, right? But a lot of people don't want to be public about certain things, right? It's no one's
Mhm.
business, and that's all a personal decision. And so when it comes to sharing those invisible disabilities, these invisible differences, you know, just finding the person that's going to be there for you, be empathetic, be solution oriented, and then just using your discretion on who you tell aside from that.
Oh, that's amazing. And I think it makes all the sense. It's like once you are in a safe place, then you can bring things up. And then that definitely builds that trust that we were speaking about earlier. We are at the end almost of our time. I have two more questions. What is your message to our audience?
Allyship is fluid. We all have opportunities to be allies as well as work with allies. And so, even though we might see ourselves more in the ally role or in the partner role, at the end of the day, we all have an opportunity to help people who are different than us and get help from people who are different than us. I think about my former business partner, and she's a Black woman. And so when people look at us, they assume, oh, Dr. V must be the ally because she's the white woman. But Certrice has been my mental health ally, my motherhood ally, my grievance ally when my father passed away, my cancer ally when I had cancer. She's been my ally in so many ways, you know, and I think the reason we are still close and have always worked well together is because we know how to play both sides of those roles. We both know how to be the ally and the partner. So allyship is fluid. We can both do both sides, and we all have the opportunity to do it.
So just do it.
Just do it.
Amazing. The last question we always ask our guests: why would you tell other people to listen to this podcast? So if you're talking to your ally or your someone and you're like, oh yeah, I was in this material business podcast and I listened to that
Because even though DEI has shifted massively, doesn't mean that this work needs to stop. So, by understanding more about what it means to both be an ally and work with an ally, you know, we can continue building a fair, more inclusive workplace together. And so my hope is that you got some tools and that you check out my book to have more resources on how to continue this work.
Amazing, Dr. V. Thank you for coming. Thank you for being so open, for giving us such a great integration of what really means to be in either of those sides. And then what does that mean for organizations? a lot of the technical work that we do teaches that, spreadsheets and math and all that is good, yeah, but ultimately it's humans doing it, right? So it's like, how can we make a better workplace is by getting the humans that work with us feel that they belong. And I have been saying it because my company is a testimony of that. However, big corporations sometimes are not as, these concepts are not as integrated. And obviously, it's easier for me because I come from a place of knowing where the lacks are, whether maybe in other organizations which are bigger, that is more complex. So hopefully we are moving in the right direction as a mass.
I'm hopeful we are. I'm hopeful we are.
Amazing. Well, thank you everyone for listening. The links are going to be below. And stay tuned for the next episode of the Material Business Podcast. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Materials Business Podcast. Feel free to visit infinitygrowth.ca to see show notes and explore other episodes. If there's someone you think should hear this episode, please share with them. Take care of yourself and have a great rest of your day.